do believe you have a superpower. You just got to discover what it is about you that is so special that gives you a competitive edge over everyone else.
UnLost Cause is a community that shares stories of individuals 40 and beyond who found the courage to reclaim their dreams and live without regrets. I'm David New, and I hope these stories help you find joy, purpose, and passion in a life true to you. UnLost Cause shares stories that inspire courage to reclaim your dreams and live without regret. I'm David New, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Andrew Motiwalla. Andrew has spent his career blending entrepreneurship, travel, and community, three powerful forces that have shaped his journey. Andrew started his career in the Peace Corps in Central America, and then he moved to working at startups and also starting a few of his own companies. Recently, Andrew founded The Good Life Abroad, which supports older people living abroad for more purpose, more fun, and more community. Andrew's story isn't just about travel. It's about designing a life with intention, and his journey embodies the essence of UnLost Cause. He had the courage to step into the unknown, trust himself, and live a life without regrets. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so, like a lot of things in life, they start when we were kids. So I'm just curious, when was your first experience with travel?
Well, I had early experiences with travel because my parents are both immigrants to the United States, one from Asia, one from South America. And back then, we would have to go on family holidays to go visit family. So I think those were the earliest experiences, but those weren't always the most pleasant.
So your early brushes with travel wasn't very positive?
Well, it wasn't negative, but visiting family in a foreign country, speaking a language that I didn't understand because I grew up in Chicago, and really I'm more a product of the Midwest than anything else. So it was uncomfortable, and because it was all different and foreign to me.
And then, joining the Peace Corps out of college, if we fast forward a little bit, is a big obligation. I've known people who do that, and, you're really sometimes set up in very rural places with a lot of poverty and a lot of challenges. So it is very different from Chicago. So what kind of was there later on in life, or maybe in college or before college, that you traveled and you got this bug of life abroad that actually was a springboard to going to the Peace Corps?
Yes, exactly. It was specifically in college when I studied abroad for a semester that completely changed my life. And the world opened up to me. And I think it was because now I was living abroad, but on my terms. I was studying something that I wanted to study. I had the weekends to go explore. I was in Ecuador. I had the weekends to explore Ecuador, hop on a bus, go places, and have everything I needed in a backpack. And as a young person, that was a really liberating and exciting and eye-opening experience that changed the course of my life.
Yeah, no, I studied abroad as well, both as undergrad and during business school, and I loved it, right? I first did it is because it was one of the requirements of my major. So I'm curious, was it a requirement of yours, or what actually even got you to walk through that gate to then experience the plethora of benefits of studying abroad?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, but I'm not proud of the reasons. So I started college, and I probably shouldn't have gone right to college from high school because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was sort of going through the motions, okay, I'm now expected to go to college, and that was never a question. But I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was probably immature. So my first couple of years of college, I just partied a lot. And I was a pretty bad student, actually. And I, drank a lot, joined a frat. But by the second year, I was sort of sad. I was like, this isn't great. This is really empty. And, just partying wasn't fulfilling. I thought I was wasting my parents' money because I wasn't doing a very good job in school. And I didn't know what I needed. And I just thought, I need to get out of here. And I don't know if I should take some time off of school and work, or I don't know. And then someone suggested, oh, you could study abroad. And I talked to an advisor and they said, well, your grades are not very good, but this program here in Ecuador, it'll accept you. And so I thought, okay, let's do it. And I went abroad, had this amazing experience, discovered a love for anthropology, for Latin American literature. And I came back to school and I went from being a 2.0 student to being a 4.0 student. I had discovered passion, some purpose, and it completely changed who I was as a student. And I ended up doing very well in school because I found something that excited me that I didn't find in the classroom before.
Wow. That's a great story, Andrew. And before we go a little bit more on that thread, growing up, did you also have any experience with entrepreneurship or any family or close family role models? Because I see that, some people, some of the guests that we have on UnLost Cause, it's their first time where they jump, but you've jumped before. So I'm just curious, did you have some role models early on?
I did. And I had jumped in my career, but I never jumped completely on my own. That was a big difference. As I got older, the latest jump was completely on my own. So it's a little different. But early on, yes. So I'm blessed or cursed, depending on how you look at it, that on my dad's side, they're originally from India. And we are from a very specific tribe in India that is known for being entrepreneurial. And on the dad's side of my family, all of the men started their own business. And some of them were large, and some of them, one uncle was literally selling kebabs on a street corner. He was quite a simple man, but there was something in our family about starting a business. And I remember one time we were back in Asia. I was with my dad, and I had a job. A regular job. I worked for someone. I was, I don't know, 21, 22 or something. And one of my uncles said, wait, to my dad, he's working for someone? No. That's not how we do it. And then this uncle explained to me, Andrew, I have been bankrupt 3 times in life, but I just pick myself up and I find some idea and I make something. He goes, you should buy your son, speaking to my dad, some machine like a plastic bag making machine. And then, Andrew, you go to grocery stores one by one and you sell plastic bags. Now, obviously, his cultural context is very different from America, but the essence of it kind of got me excited. I'm like, this guy just does something and he grinds it out. And it's not sexy and exciting. It was like, and he fails and he picks himself up and does it again and does it again. And this specific uncle was actually quite successful eventually and extremely wealthy. And that kind of stuck with me. And I have an uncle who's in the United States as well, my dad's brother, who started some businesses in the United States and became quite successful. So I did have these role models. And there was sort of this expectation within the family that you should start something. My dad, however, was a little different from his brothers in that something about him, he didn't have the same risk tolerance. Growing up as a kid, watching him, he would always flirt with ideas. He used to get like Entrepreneur Magazine. He would look at like, do I get a Subway franchise, whatever. But he never really had that entrepreneur, steel spine to say, I'm going to make the leap. So sometimes he worked with his brother, but for the most part, he worked at large companies with a normal 9 to 5. And he was, a happy guy and didn't really want the stress of entrepreneurship on him.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating because the whole family you can draw inspiration from, but your dad bucked the trend. So you're kind of a product of both of those competing forces. And so I'll definitely want to dig into that a little bit more later when you actually do that jump, which you noted was solo versus potential of co-founders. But, so growing up, so you have this entrepreneurial kind of influence. Then later on in life, you had travel, but you had this first positive travel experience in college. Some people, when they think about turning a lost cause into UnLost Cause, it starts like in childhood. They really love something, but their parents like, you're never going to make money, so bury that. It sounds like yours may have came a little bit later, but I'm making that assumption. So when did you start having this idea of like, oh, maybe potentially doing something around travel for a livelihood in a business?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I left the Peace Corps, I came home back to my parents' house. I didn't really have, anything set up. And I was very lost. And I just was laying in bed a lot. And my dad came in one day. It was right before Christmas time. So they cut me some slack. They said, okay, you've been gone for 2.5 years. You've been in the middle of nowhere. Like, it's fine. Be home, enjoy your mom's cooking, enjoy Christmas with the family. But then when January rolled around, my dad said, okay, you can't be laying around here. You need to go get a job. And I said, okay. But then nothing excites me. I mean, I'm back to suburban Chicago. And I said, Dad, nothing is exciting. And he said, son, you are spoiled. I came to this country. I came to this country with very little. And I have worked in jobs that I pretty much hated every day when I made money for you and your sister so we could pay for you to go to college. And now it's your turn to start working. You don't have to like it. I've never liked my job. And I'm like, this, it's like what always happens with the younger generation, right? They look at you, they roll their eyes. And I said, but Dad, I have learned in the Peace Corps that I want three things in my life. I want something international because I love travel. I want something that does good in the world because I have did this project in Peace Corps that was actually doing some good. And I do love business. And so I want something that is a business that makes money. And I want to combine these three things, doing good, travel, and making money. And he just laughed and said, oh my God, if I could have a wish list, of my perfect job, but I never did. So just suck it up, son, and go get a job. And I said, oh, okay, you're right, Father. And so I went to a headhunter and she sent me out on interviews. And I ended up sitting down at the end of one day after I had interviewed with the woman from HR at the American Cup Company in Chicago. And she said, we'd like to offer you this job. You're going to be in charge of selling paper cups in the Midwest territory. Congratulations. You even have Wrigley Field where the Cubs play is part of your territory. That's a great, great job. And I looked at her and said, ma'am, I've been living in the mountains of Honduras. And before that, I was in Ecuador studying abroad. And I was studying in indigenous cultures and Andean. And I don't know that I could sell cups for the rest of my life. And she looked at me and said, son, that is amazing. I mean, very nice, sort of simple woman in suburban Chicago, the Cup Company. She said, you should be in the United Nations or something.
Uh-huh.
What are you doing in Chicago trying to sell cups? And I said, I don't know. and so that was a real wake-up call.
Love it.
And at that point, I called my cousin who was older than me and lived in New York City. And he said, Andrew, you got to get out to New York. This is where it's happening. It's something international. Suburban Chicago isn't really going to cut it for you. And so that was the first step towards trying to combine those three elements in my life. And I found a job that was actually kind of entrepreneurial and the first step towards travel. It combined some of these elements, but it was a nonprofit. And I did that for a number of years and then realized I don't want to be the nonprofit guy. I really want to be in a for-profit business. And because I think you can scale a little easier because you can raise capital, et cetera. And so eventually I then moved into for-profit. And that was sort of the beginning of my path.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Oh man, so many talk about immigrant parents like mine. I'm like, oh, I can resonate with so many of those stories, and it makes me chuckle and cry a little bit inside, but in a good way. So before you make that jump and to start the good life abroad, I think a lot of listeners think about like, hey, I have this dream. I'm in this career, I'm doing this, and it's really hard for them to make that leap for good reasons because they want to be very thoughtful. Now, tell us a little bit about the career arc, what you were doing, and then particularly maybe the 3 to 5 years immediately prior to starting the good life abroad.
So most of the career arc, I was a co-founder.
Okay.
And again, it goes back to what you touched upon or you hinted upon with my dad really not jumping off on his own. And I think there was a little bit of that risk aversion in me where I thought, okay, I'll do this with someone else.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So I'm not going to completely be on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I did this with someone who had more experience. And I remember early in my career, at one point, a couple of fellows came to me and said, we'd like you to start a business and we want to invest in you. We've been very impressed. And I said, no, 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 no. I can't do it. I don't know enough. And I went all these reasons why I couldn't. I mean, total imposter
Yeah,
syndrome.
imposter syndrome. Yeah.
It's like, and I rejected it. I rejected the money, and they said, okay, fine, yeah. And so I ended up joining as a co-founder, and that felt safe. It felt comforted. And the other founder had more experience, but also had more access to capital and investors, which was helpful because that was something that was very much out of my league. Then within that company, I would start new business units. So it was almost entrepreneurial experience. But then when you get to the 3 to 5 years right before I started The Good Life Abroad, which is then a co-founder with in some other companies, other ventures. And then right before I went to work for a company as a chief revenue officer. So then I was an employee. I was not an entrepreneur in that, but it was partly due to the fact that this is around the time when my kids were getting older. And I think this is very common for people around this age, is that you are scared because you think I need to take care of my kids' education and the needs of the family first and foremost. So I took this job. It was, a good compensation. And I thought, this is a safe bet. This is what I should be doing right now.
And how old were you at that time, roughly?
I was probably 45.
Okay.
Roughly. And the kids were I could see, high school was coming up quickly, and I could see college around the corner. And so time to start saving and socking away money, and not time to be playing entrepreneur games that are risky. Right? But then I parted ways with that company, and that led to the crossroads.
Okay.
And I'll pause there if you want.
Yeah. Okay. And leading up to the crossroad, did anyone else know about this dream or this passion around doing good, travel, and then also, being a commercial entity and making money? Did anyone else know?
My girlfriend, and she's the biggest supporter. She's very similar to me. That's why we've been together for years. So she's always very supportive, but she also understands that my kids are the most important thing in my life. And so I'm trying to balance, being a good dad plus being who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so well, that's one thing I want to talk about is like support network. So you said that she was the only one. So no one else, like your dad or no one else in your family or
my dad knew, but he's still old school. Just take a job, son.
Yeah. And then, so when you share this with your girlfriend, so she was one of your biggest supporters, biggest cheerleaders?
Correct. She was a big cheerleader and helped me think through the many options, the different paths I could go down. Obviously, there was go back to work for a company. There's do your own thing completely on your own. There's join a founding team, which was a familiar experience, and kind of hedging your bets.
Yeah.
And so trying to think through those big paths. And then, of course, I had my friends who know me in a professional and in a personal context. They sort of understood my general inclinations, but what they were really helpful for is helping me do an inventory of my strengths and my skills, because I think that is maybe one of the most important things. When you're young, you don't really know yourself. I mean, at least I didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know for me, it feels like when you get older, you become a little more reflective and develop a little more emotional intelligence and say, okay, so who am I exactly? Like, what do I bring to the table? And I do think that people have superpowers. It's like one muscle that is like incredibly big, but at the same time, the flip side of that, other muscles are like really weak. So I'm really good in some areas and really weak in others. And I think I have a much more clear understanding of that now as I got older. And so some of these friends would help me kind of go through this process of creating an inventory of strengths and weaknesses to then use that as a filter against the different opportunities that I had presented.
Love it. And when your friends are helping you do this inventory, was this like throughout your career, or was this after the last gig? And so now we're going to come to that point, like before jumping and starting The Good Life Abroad, or was it like really condensed into that little pocket where you're like, hey, you told people and they're like, well, let's take you through this inventory and give you more visibility?
Yeah, it was exactly around that point, right before, because before that, I'd been jumping from thing to thing. I didn't have much problem founding teams. People would seek me out, or within the larger company, that was it sort of jumped from thing to thing. I never really took a break. But this, for the first time in my life, I saw that this could be my last hurrah. Hopefully, it would take me through to retirement if I did it
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And so this became very focused, and I was actively seeking people out and trying to get their advice and input. I
Mm,
reached out to old mentors and said, "This is what I'm thinking about. There's some different paths I could go down." My girlfriend, some other friends. I was very intentional at this point, and I think it was because I think I wanted to take the jump solo, but I was scared and I was looking for validation amongst
yes,
people.
yes. So let's dig into this. I think the audience would really love to, and I want to hear more about this inventory. I don't know if it's based on strength finders or something else, but can you share like how your friends walked you through this and what that exercise was like with as much detail as possible?
Sure. It ran the gamut.
Yeah.
I have I have one friend who his approach is let's sit down with a case of beer and let's have some beers and talk freely and openly
Hmm.
and just kind of, you know, really close friends and let me have it. And then I had another friend, one of my cousin actually, he used a tool called Culture Index. It's a one of these personality inner driver frameworks. I had another friend and mentor who is really big into Enneagram. And so that was another tool. So we really ranged, but there was some clear through lines that emerged in these things. And one was because again, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that there were paths I could go down. And the path of pure entrepreneurship is was a wide path. It could have gone back into technology. It could go into travel. And so there's a lot of uncertainty even within those three paths. And of course, at this point, I thought, well, travel is a passion, but you've got these kids and you want to retire young, hopefully. But tech is really where the money is at. So then it was like, what do I do there? And through some of these conversations with friends and mentors,
Hmm.
it became clear that, Andrew, in this case, following your passion is going to be actually more lucrative than doing something in technology because you're doing it for all the wrong reasons. You're doing it just because the business plan, the spreadsheets penciled out nicely, all the downloads, the technology can scale very, really big. However, they were so clear that my heart wasn't totally into it. And when I started talking about travel and ideas within travel, the way I would light up, and then also leveraging my skill is not that of a technologist. And so it wasn't leveraging my strongest muscle. My strongest muscle is this passion for travel, this ability to speak about it in a persuasive way and craft a story around travel, and my contacts around the world that I've developed over many years. So that then started to lead towards, okay, you should do something within travel.
Great, great. Well, I love how thoughtful that was on the kind of the career compass and telling you like, hey, I could do technology. It feels maybe more lucrative or safer because I've done that before, or travel where my passion is. And your friends or mentors advice is following passions is actually going to be more lucrative because that's what you actually care about. And so I thought that was a very good point. So then tell us, what else did you do to get prepared, right? Like, so when we think about, starting a company, there's familial obligations, there could be childcare issues, there's obviously financial obligations, there's also like, hey, timing obligations and partners. So, think that whole kind of landscape of things that one has to consider, and how much planning did you do, on all those vectors?
Yeah. Those considerations were probably the most difficult to jumping off on my own earlier in life because the kids were smaller. I didn't have the nest egg. So big consideration again, I had mentioned was the kids' education and making sure they had enough money to take care of them. So I did sell a huge stake in a company that I had started many years prior. I was a co-founder on. So that freed up a bunch of capital. And when I sold that, people were like, no, why? The company's doing well. I said, no, I need to have some certainty in my life now. So selling that was a big shift. And then putting that money away, say, okay, the kids will be fine. Their education will be fine. That's handled. Now, I'm going to now risk the money for me, my retirement and some of my savings, but I'm willing to do that knowing the kids will be okay. That getting your financial house in order was at first. Then entrepreneurship in general consumes you. It's all consuming. You're physically maybe at an office a lot or working late at night, but mentally you're also not always present with your friends. You're like, because your brain is always racing about
Yes,
the
yes.
thing. And so it's kind of like, where are you? And I didn't want to be not present for my kids. So at that time, my older daughter had graduated from high school and was going to head off to college. So that became very easy, right? And then my younger daughter, on her own volition, this wasn't me pushing her, but she said, I would like to go to boarding school. I would like to go. It was some very specific reasons she had to go to boarding school and was on the East Coast of the United States. I support you 100%. And so she went to boarding school, and suddenly I was an empty nester. And so I thought, okay, now I can really dive in.
Got
And then I had the conversation with my girlfriend and said, okay, you met me. I was with this company where I was an employee, and it was kind of nice. I could clock out, 9 to 5. But if I'm going to do this, it's going to take up. You're going to feel it. And she said, nope, I totally get it. I support you. I love the idea for the good life abroad. I know it'll be rough for a couple of years, but hopefully you can find an equilibrium. And then hopefully this will all lead toward us being able to eventually, go move into retirement and really have all the time together we want. And so getting your relationships in order as well as your financial house in order.
Yeah. Well, I think that, one of the things that is fascinating to me is that in the US, 5 million small businesses are started every year. But you would think that all of them are being started by these kids dropping out of college and doing these tech startups. But that's not true. About 50% of them are started by people like us, 40 and over, in this community at UnLost Cause. And I think there are certain headwinds to doing it later in life. Like, I just don't have as much energy as I did when I was 20. But then there's certainly tailwinds, right? Like, my kids are getting a little bit older. They may need less time. I'm a little bit more calm. I don't let things stress me out as much. And to your point, I might have saved up a little bit of money so that I can have some of that tolerance. And then you also have this great network of mentors and friends that you could rely on to do the inventory and the assessment to give you that honest feedback. So I think that's great. And I really appreciated how you talked about it, and even how transparent you were to your girlfriend to say look, this is the way we are right now. And I know it's going to be different, and being very upfront about that to get her buy-in. I thought that was very mature and something that, the audience can certainly learn from. So then now as you're getting ready, so you've checked all the boxes, and you raised money for the Good Life Abroad. Is that correct?
I did eventually, but I started out thinking I would completely bootstrap it
Okay,
myself.
so let's talk about that, because most people that we've had on UnLost Cause, they bootstrap it, right? So then you did bootstrap and then raise money. So I'll walk us through that.
Sure. So one of the things I needed to ask myself was, okay, is this a passion project? Is this a lifestyle business? What are you really building? Or is this a real scalable business? And I could go either way, right? Like you said, oh, I don't have the energy when I was 27. I was crazy when I was 27. I mean, I would sleep at the office.
Yeah.
And, and now I need to sleep, my back hurts if I don't sleep in a good bed. I mean, it's so different how, so I thought, I don't know, but let's play worst case scenario. It's a small lifestyle business that generates some income for me, and it's really fun, and I'm getting to do the things I like to do with travel. And so let's bootstrap it with that in mind. And I'll just do as much as I have to do and slowly invest in this. What happened was it took off pretty quickly. And I started looking at some metrics such as our cost per click on our ads, our cost per lead, generate leads, and then our conversion rate from lead to sale. And I had not seen anything like it in any of my previous business experience. And I thought, whoa, okay, this has potential. This is a novel idea. So it's new to the market, and that is a unique opportunity to have something new. It's not a me too. And the numbers that I'm seeing are really great. And so I talked to previous co-founder, and who has more of a finance background, and he said, I would completely invest in this. You're onto something. And I fought it. I fought against it, actually. There was a time him and a friend, another friend, and me, we were out we went away for the weekend somewhere. And that night, over drinks and whatnot, he's like, you should take my money and let me invest. And I said, no, I want to own the whole pie, and I'm onto something. And I was getting a little greedy. And he said, but Andrew, you're so onto something, but if you're not careful, other people will catch on and competition will emerge. And then you'll get steamrolled because you're really not going to be able to grow it as fast as you need to with your limited resources. And if you took on, he has a company, an investment firm, and if you took my capital, we could really scale this up faster. And then you actually become an acquisition target versus someone the competition will steamroll. And so then I had to start thinking about, okay, the first branch in the road is, do you take money or not? Then if you go down the branch of let's take money, it's like, okay, whose money do I take? And what does that look like? Because your life will change the moment you take money.
Yeah.
So that was part of that process.
Wow, wow. And then the other thing that you and I had discussed earlier that I thought was fascinating, and I'm like, this person definitely has a digital marketing background when we discussed it, because I'm like, that's really thoughtful, was you're like, well, I bought some Facebook ads
Yeah.
and I just ginned up like, hey, some phony prices, or, just some test prices, and then dropped them to a landing page and just saw, well, what was the cost per click, and then, or the cost per lead if they filled that out, and which gives me this confidence or indication of interest. So I'm sure you can explain it much better, but if there are other people who are thinking about pressure testing the demand side to see if their idea holds water, can you walk the audience through like how you would, in a simplified way, what you did so that they can learn from that?
Yeah, I'm definitely a little bit of a hacker when it comes to this type of thing. And I've done this throughout my career. So it's
Yeah.
not just if you're starting a business, but if you're even thinking about launching a new product within an existing company, I'll often create a landing page that lays out the concept, and you can use some of these landing page builders. I really like Unbounce because it allows for easy A/B testing, because you always want to know, is it the idea that's off or is it just the presentation that's off? So we have to do a lot of testing on the presentation as well as the concept. Build a landing page, very simple. I'm not a technical person, so I had someone off of Upwork, some developing country, built it pretty low cost, allowed me to be able to flexibly, easily edit the page myself. And then exactly as you said, I went on to Facebook, said, who'd be the right audience for this? And well, actually, before I did any of that, first thing I did is I had this idea, but then I started going through and scraping out forums related to this topic in Reddit, in Facebook groups, to understand what people were talking about, what were the pain points, and specifically around my business, Good Life Abroad, is about living abroad for some period of time. So I was going to forums around expats and people who want to be expats, and what were the questions. And I actually had someone offshore scrape out, and we created a giant spreadsheet, and then we tabulated it, consolidated it to see, okay, these are like the 5 main pain points people are facing. And they're just asking the same questions over and over in these forums. I said, okay, I got to solve for these pain points. So then we went to create the landing page, and I used the pain points in the copy, right? Like copywriting 101, but address customers' pain. How are you going to help them? And don't just talk about the features of your product. Don't talk about yourself. Talk about them. And so that became really clear, one-to-one correlation, pain points to marketing copy. Then put the Facebook ads out around who I thought the target audience would be. And I did a couple of experiments. I had a couple hypotheses of who the target audience was. And then they'd fill out the form to get a free catalog. It was just a PDF I made in in Word, and some great photos and some pricing. And then I created a way to sell just using Typeform and with a Stripe checkout link at the end to see if people were really willing to put down money for this. And actually started selling product that I didn't have.
I love it. Wow. Okay, so I'll try to put these all in the links that you mentioned. Unbounce, which is a landing page testing platform. And landing page for those is just a very specialized page, usually with not a lot of links to anywhere else, but trying to get a user to take a specific action. In this case, it was to get their information to get the download. Use Upwork, which is a global marketplace for freelancers that you can take a look at. And then once you created the download or the Word and you just PDF'd it, and then use Typeform to create a payment page and Stripe for the backend.
Correct.
So with those 5 things, how much time do you think you invested and how much dollars, including maybe you can break out the Facebook ads, just so if people are like probably fascinated, they're probably rewinding this and listening to it again. Like, tell us like the scope.
Yeah, I think I probably spent 5,000 total to get someone. We did start with the Unbounce page for the ads, but then we built a very basic website. So that took a little bit of money. And then I had to pay these people to kind of scrape things and gather data for me. So I think all in, that was about 5,000. And then I put up 2,000 towards Facebook ads. And then I did have to pay a developer, which again, is part of that 5,000 to connect the Stripe into the Typeform and kind of just a little too technical for me. But it was a quick way of getting a checkout process and be able to start collecting money.
And then to some people, that might sound very cost efficient. To others, it might sound a lot. But what is, as we all know, cost is one thing, but it's the return on the investment that's really important. And in this case, it's probably the learning. So can you talk about like, what did you learn and how valuable that was to you?
Right. The number one thing I wanted to see was cost of acquisition. I mean, that's everything in business, right? So from the click to the lead to the actual sale. So the testing was on the messaging on the landing page, and the testing was also on the ad. What ads were going to get the most engagement and clicks at the cheapest possible level? And as you know, Facebook and Instagram, it rewards engagement, right? So the landing page was a landing page, but the Facebook ads, when I started playing around with the ad copy, that's when I started to see these really low cost per clicks. Let me give you a very specific test, which became a very key insight in the beginning. I thought, I'm starting the travel business. So let's look for a persona of people who love travel, who have a certain income, maybe live in certain parts of the United States, love travel. Makes sense. Not the best. Then I had another campaign, which was targeting people who were into retirement planning. It was like retirement mindset, looking at retirement planners, investments, people who read like Kiplinger's, because people who just love travel, they might just like, the Costco discount cruise or, take the train across the United States. It doesn't necessarily mean they have the money or the mindset to really get this international concept that I'm promoting. Whereas when you go to people who are in a retirement mindset, they tend to be a little more sophisticated in their tastes. They're obviously have enough money that they're working with a retirement planner to set up their financial future. And then, of course, they love travel because all retirees like travel, or most of them do, right? So optimize for the right persona versus for the specific interest. And that became a huge learning. And also it unlocked very low cost of customer acquisition. And then that's when I realized, okay, we're onto something, and maybe now it's time to invest a little bit more.
Okay. So now you've got this market validation because of this very thoughtful research that you did that was extremely well executed, and thanks for explaining. So then now it's about investing more. Is this when you start hanging the shingle where you tell the whole world, I'm going to do this, or are you going to take another measure step before you do that?
At that point, I hung the shingle. I officially incorporated. I used Stripe Atlas, which is a great tool for entrepreneurs. It's essentially startup in a box. Your incorporation, you get a bunch of discounts with services that every company is going to need, and incorporated it. And then I said, okay, now I've got to go find a way to deliver these products that I sold. So then I hopped on a plane, went to Europe, and started like meeting. I mean, it was a whirlwind of like, I need to deliver this. I need to find apartments and staff, someone who's going to deliver the experience to our travelers. It was kind of crazy. I ended up just hiring like a friend's wife who was a stay-at-home mom. And I need help. and I don't know exactly what I need, but we're gonna have to deliver like these cool experiences. And my friend said, oh, my wife's been at home with the kids, and kids are kind of growing up now, so she should probably get back to work. And
Ah,
and ask her if she's interested. And I asked her, I said, Jennifer, what do you think? And she said, I don't know. I'm not really a business person, but I'm down for an adventure. And I've been in the startup environment before, so I know that everything's going to be unpredictable. But I think it's a cool concept, and I'm down to help. So it wasn't like totally well thought out. Like, okay, let's make a job description for a certain profile. No, it was just like all hands on deck suddenly, and I'll take anyone's hands to start getting this rolling. And so we created the actual product, the program that we would deliver. And then I came back to the US, and okay, the shingle was hung. We actually had some product that we could sell. And then we got a little more serious, and I spent more of my money to start building a proper website,
yeah.
not just this kind of quick and down and dirty. And those next few months are when things started to take off, and I realized I could raise money around this idea. And then I had to go back and forth in that thought process. And that process of raising money took about 6 months.
Okay. Okay. So before we go dive into that process raising money, share with the audience, like, what does the Good Life Abroad do, and how is it different than other options, and how does it address all the pain points that you were seeing in your diligence and your research prior to even, launching those ads?
Yeah. So the Good Life Abroad, it started with this question. I put it on my own Facebook just for my friends. I said, hey, has anyone out there wanted to go live abroad live in Europe or live abroad for a few months of the year? Because that's something I wanted to do in my retirement. I didn't want to leave the United States permanently. I love living in California. I love my home, my friends, but I'd like to spend a few months every year in Europe. And all these people say, oh, I would love to, I'd love to, I'd love to. And then the question, I turn it around and say, okay, you all said you'd love to. Why haven't you?
Beautiful.
Why haven't you? And more pain points. So the Good Life Abroad exists to address that, to allow people to go live abroad in Europe. In this case, we'll expand around the world over time, but it solves the loneliness problem because we have a community of people who are other travel lovers who value cultural immersion, who will all have their own apartments, but in a walking distance. So David, you might live, down the block, and someone else might live around there. So we are all, it's sort of like college. You have your friends in the dorms, and you can, text like, hey, who wants to meet up for lunch or let's go out to dinner. But you could also have this independence to explore a place at your own pace, kind of get into the local rhythm of things. So the opposite of a tour is you got to get up in the morning, hop on the bus, go, see lots of things every day, check out of the hotel, go to the next town, check into the hotel. And this is completely different. This is a month long minimum. Get your own apartment, have activities and events prepared for you, cooking classes, wine tastings, some nice meals, some tours, sprinkle out through the course of a month. But really, it's a chance for you to go off and explore this place at your own rhythm, your own pace, your own interests, but having community and also having a local staff member, our community manager, there to support you and to recommend things to you that are unique to you. So if you're a jazz lover, oh, there's a jazz concert at the university you might not know about. Perfect way to connect into the local culture and discover new things, but also having friends to go enjoy these things with.
Yeah. Wow. That I think makes a lot of sense, especially for people who have that yearning. And that was a great question. Is the follow-up is, well, why haven't you done it if that's what you want to do? So you're seeing that you definitely hit a nerve. There's demand, and then because of that, you heeded your friend's advice to go raise money. Raising money in 6 months, I would consider that relatively efficient. So share with us like how that process went and then the learnings you got from that.
So I have there's specifically two friends who have a great deal of experience in business.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them is very much your traditional Harvard MBA type guy. And okay, Andrew, let's talk to potential angel investors. Let's get their feedback. Let's go through this process. We'll create like an auction environment so then you can get the best proper valuation. Very smart guy. He started setting up meetings with investors in the space, people who are very senior in the travel industry who might want to invest as an angel. He helped put together the plan, a little more formal. And then the other friend is a CEO of a company that's in the travel space, but not working with older people, working with student travel. And he said, let me just invest in you. And I will give you this much, but I want a significant stake of your business. And I thought the amount was a little low. I thought the valuation was low. And I didn't love the idea of giving up potentially some control of the company with someone with a significant stake in it. And these two competing paths, right? So it's a strategic investor is the way to think about it versus a traditional angel. And as I was going through this process and talking to all these potential angels, a few things went through my mind. One, man, these guys don't really know my business and seem to have a lot of advice to give. And like, oh, you should do this, you should do that. I'm like, man, like you barely even let me talk. It's like they almost like hearing themselves talk. And sometimes they had some nuggets in there, but some part of raising money is it's a bit of a show, right? You've got to listen and say, yeah, that's a great. But inside I was like, oh man, do I have to like list like every quarter then like send this guy reports and, do this thing and we were trying to raise about $2 million in the seed round. And I thought, okay, so if I get $100,000, and that's a lot of people per person. I'm going to have to, it's a lot of people I'm going to have to listen to and keep up. And suddenly I have this whole investor relations function that I need to do. And as we were talking, some of these guys were saying, okay, you need to grow. These numbers are not growing fast enough because the returns that we'd want in the time frame that we want necessitate a faster growth, a steeper growth curve. And I thought, I don't know that will work. I thought at one moment that might break the product. It could create bad customer experiences to try to grow that fast. And I understood why they were saying it because think from their point of view, they can deploy their capital anywhere. It's just about growing their capital. And so travel isn't it's not technology, right? Like I can put in $100,000 in a travel startup or I can put in $100,000 in a technology startup that could scale like instantly, by just once they figure out product market fit, they can just scale it up, pour money in and get your money out. And then the other thought I had is these angels, they're just placing bets, knowing full well that most of them are going to fail. And I don't want to be the guy who fails. I want to be the guy. This is not a bet for me. This is my life. And it happens to be my passion as well.
Yes.
And so I'm taking it pretty seriously. I'm taking it very seriously. So the strategic, he actually made the most convincing argument at the end. He said, look, these other guys, you're a bet. For me, you're my only bet. And I need you to succeed. I believe what you're going to do is great. It has so much potential. I will make damn sure that you succeed because you have my full attention as well. This is going to be our biggest investment. And you will have the full resources and support of my company to make sure you succeed. So yeah, you have a smaller slice of the pie, but it's a much higher level of certainty that there will be a pie in 5 years and that the pie will be significantly bigger than if you did it on your own.
Yeah.
And you won't have to, put on any sort of investor relations act for 20 different people or 10 different people. It's just me. I call the shots. You don't have to if you convince me on something major, we're in and let's go. And you should think of me as a thought partner because this is big for me and not just the guy who's going to be, calling you and say, why are sales down this week? And kind of being a thorn in your side. I want to be your partner in this. And so that is ultimately the path I took. And I think it was the right path because I am also don't have the temperament to do investor relations. As an entrepreneur, I don't know if you've ever felt this, but it's like, wait, I don't have time you want me to do reports? Like, I don't want to do reports. I need to sell and market. And there's like a million things that need to be like urgently handled. And doing reports and for investors who maybe they read them, maybe they don't, is just not how I wanted to spend my time.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that, Andrew. So let's get an update on, so when was that discussion and how is the company doing now?
So we officially hard launch January 1st, 2024. So just over a year ago. Here we are in early March of 2025. The company is growing very quickly. We're on track to do about 7 million in revenue this year.
Woo!
It
7 million. Everyone hear that in 1 year. That is amazing. Congratulations.
is really hit a nerve. Our NPS score is 82 right now, which I've never seen in any other business.
And so just so the audience knows, NPS stands for Net Promoter Score. And the gentleman, I think it's Reichard, who pioneered it at Bain, and he wrote a book. And basically it asks one simple question from a scale of 0 to 10. How likely would you refer this offering to a friend or a colleague? And so the beauty is it asks one question, and then the score could be from a negative 100 to a positive 100. So anything usually above 50 is outstanding. So your Apples of the world, your Trader Joe's will be in the 70s. So to get 82 is out of this world. And then, of course, you'll have negative, like your Comcast of the world, or, bad
Credit card
service.
companies.
It'll be like negative 50. So
Yeah.
that's impressive, Andrew.
Yeah. So it's been a wild ride. And now the focus has been on, okay, we're growing this thing. We took the money. Now we have to deploy the money and we have to grow. And so it's hiring, it's building systems and processes. And I don't know what you're like internally in your mind, but for me, as a scrappy entrepreneur, as a bit of a growth hacker, I'm not very process oriented. But as you're scaling, you need process. Yeah. Otherwise it falls apart. And so I have been actively trying to look for people who are different from me and complementary to me, who can start building processes and take the vision that I have and the passion and then turn it into replicable systems. And that's been a big part of it. And then also at this point, investing in technologies that help us scale things up, but at the same time, keep some human contact to the process, because fundamentally what we're selling is a very human experience. And our market are people who are 55 and older, so retirees mostly, that value human contact, and they don't want to be sent to an app to just do it yourself.
Yeah. And then what countries can they go to now? Is it still you said it's still Europe, but what is the country options, or is it still focused on, I believe it was Italy?
So we started out very small. It's just a quick few cities that we could promote. But now today we're in 12 cities across Europe. We're in Amsterdam, Florence, Italy, Lisbon, Barcelona, Valencia, Sardinia, Vienna, Prague. I mean, beautiful, iconic cities that you could imagine living in for a month or two. So we've expanded quite a bit. And we have a whole team in Europe now to make sure that as we scale, the quality doesn't diminish. In fact, if anything, because we're starting to scale and have resources, we're able to really invest in quality and making sure everyone's happy. Because one of the things that we've seen is a huge return rate. I think about right now, 30% of our people buy another trip within a few months.
That's what I was going to ask you, is like, what is the repeat rate? That's outstanding. And that's only been the time frame of within 1 year, right? Like if you give them 2 years or 3 years, they'll get that wanderlust back and hopefully come back to the good life abroad.
Yeah. I think we would have even had a higher one, but in the beginning, we didn't even have enough products for people to buy. They said, well, you only have 3 cities. When are you going to go to more? So now we have 12, and that repeat rate, I think, will continue to grow. And we have some real power users. Just yesterday, I got emailed by a woman and said, okay, I met you in Barcelona. I did your program, and now I'm booked for 2 more for this year, but I want to book 2 more for 2026. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And I mean, they become passionate about it because it's a different way to travel. It meets their needs. They've done the tours, they've done the cruises. They want to do something more immersive. And also the thing with retirees is that they know that there's a limited window of time when they physically can still do this. At some point, the body just can't keep going like it used to. And so I hear it so often from people, oh, well, I want to do as many of these as I can while I can.
Yes. Got it. And so if you take a step back now, you've done something remarkable. How has this career change impacted your family?
So I was worried as I mentioned about maybe not being fully present for my kids or my mind being distracted with the business. What's been amazing and surprising in the best possible way is
Mhm.
my kids are now old enough to understand what I'm doing, and they're part of the show. They love it. They're following it. They're understanding when I come home and we talk on the phone about certain things. And one of my younger daughter, who's away at boarding school, she was home for the holidays and she wrote me a little letter, was my Christmas gift from her.
Oh.
And she said, Dad, I'm so proud of you. You're like so inspiring how you have this idea. And because they heard me, musing about with different ideas. And you went from this idea and suddenly you have this website, and for them, they see the social media posts and they see the website, and they see the testimonials. Like they haven't actually, well, she didn't experience it, but for her to see it come to fruition in a relatively short period of time, she's like, anything is possible. I've seen it through you. And she doesn't want to be an entrepreneur, but that I think was like amazing for me. And then my older daughter who had graduated from high school actually went to work for me for a few months. She went off to Europe as a part of her gap year, and she totally gets what we do, has been with my customers. She was doing social media for us out in the trips, and she's fallen in love with the product. And she actually now is inspired. She'll start college in the fall and she will study business and entrepreneurship. And so it wasn't a negative. It was actually a positive because the kids were ready to and able to understand what it was I was doing.
Yeah, yeah. And how does your father feel about it?
It's so funny. He's always a little nervous when I have an idea and he tells me 10 reasons why it's a bad idea and we shouldn't do this. And why don't you just get a job like everyone else? But now that he's seen it take off, he said to me the other day, I'm very proud of you, son. This is great. I didn't even understand what this was because my parents are just not my target customers. They're not that sophisticated type of travelers, but he's very proud of me.
Yeah. And, I think one phenomenon I notice from entrepreneurs, and I suffer from this myself, is that once I've accomplished something, I always think about what's the next thing I need to do versus being in the moment. So Andrew, have you had time to step back and be proud of yourself and take it all in?
You're helping right now. No, because every day is like, what are we going to tackle? What are we going to build? But a friend of mine, the friend who was helping me go down the path of raising money from angel investors,
Mm-hmm.
we still talk. At some point I said, look, I'm not going to pursue this path. I'm going to go this other path. And he said, oh, sure. That's great. And I'm your biggest cheerleader, man. And so we talk maybe once a quarter, and we talked on our last call, and he said, tell me about your numbers. And I shared some of these numbers, and he said, man, you've got to be really proud. I said, what do you mean? Like, there's so much to do right now. He goes, just stop, pat yourself on the back, and get back to work. But that's something to be proud of. And so it's starting to kick in a little bit.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And if you could write a letter to yourself, maybe I think you said let's say your 45-year-old self before you jumped and you're kind of in that pocket, what would be the maybe two top things you would share with yourself?
I think it's the same things I probably tell my kids today,
Mhm.
which is I don't think of myself as extraordinary. I think of myself as very ordinary. I think of myself as a B student. I just sort of coasted. It's not like, oh, I was some genius who went to Harvard and Yale and, worked at the top companies. And it's just like firing on all cylinders. You know these people, and you're probably one of these people. But I'm sort of just this average guy from the Midwest who kind of not very impressive academically in any way. But the thing I tell my kids and I tell my 40-year-old self is I do believe you have a superpower. You just got to discover what it is about you that is so special that gives you a competitive edge over everyone else. And then how do you double down on that? I think Peter Thiel talks about it as the monopoly of one, perhaps. And that's part of what came out of that inventory exercise with my friends is what is the thing that you have that no one else has, they can't beat you at? And part of it for me, it was this love of passion. So, and my daughter feeling a little lost about college, didn't know what she wanted to do. Now, okay, entrepreneurship, but she still doesn't know what to do. And she's said, I want to do entrepreneurship because I can once I figure out what my passion is, then I can use the skills of business and entrepreneurship to turn it into something. But I think that's the thing every person has to discover on their own is who are you really and what's your secret sauce or your superpower?
Yeah, I love how you were able to, one, talk to and engage with your loved ones prior to embarking on this journey. And, success is never guaranteed, but given all the success and the promise is also re-engage with them and bring them on the journey and be able to have them come along for the ride and have them own aha moments like your daughter studying entrepreneurship and business, which I just find is super touching and, kind of full circle when we started the conversation about, mentors and experiences that were meaningful in the beginning of your life. Well, this is obviously going to be one for her.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So a fun question. If you were writing a book, a song, or a movie about your journey thus far, what would the title be? Or would there be a specific song or a movie that would be the one that you would select?
I think it would be a book called The Erratic Entrepreneur. Because my career is always like somewhat I've always had these entrepreneurial tendencies, and I've rebounded between tech, travel related things that were more passionate, tech thinking I can make more money, and sort of not fully committing, kind of going back and forth, back and forth. It's just kind of erratic behavior. And I think now that I've really looked deep into myself and have better knowledge of self, I was able to dive in and fully and be true to myself. And I think that's what is leading to the success of this, because it's so totally who I am. It's coming from my soul. But really, the story of my life is very erratic. So I'd be the erratic entrepreneur.
Yeah. And I think that's also a good note for the audience is that very rarely from childhood till UnLost Cause is it a straight line, right? It's always going to go like this, like that. It might seem to the outside world it's random or it's erratic, but sometimes just got to trust the process and everything happens for a reason to prepare us for that next eventuality, which may be another curveball. But since we've seen some of them, we're ready for them. So I think that's something great to keep in mind, because if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, right? And we wouldn't have we wouldn't need to have this conversation.
Exactly.
So Andrew, for someone who's listening, who has a similar dream, but feels too old, too busy, too late, what would you share with them?
I would encourage them to do some introspection first, because you might have a dream. It doesn't necessarily have to be a business. Mm-hmm. It could be a passion project. It could be a hobby.
Yes.
So I think you really need to do some kind of inventory of yourself and understand your own needs, because entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. And just because you like something, by making it a business, you might actually take the fun out of it. Because right now, the last thing I want to do is get on a plane anywhere, because I'm so tired of traveling. So, but seriously though, I think starting with some introspection around what do I really want to get and what are my priorities, and I do think it is good to think about your responsibilities as a human to maybe family, or if you're a caretaker for a parent, for example, that maybe this specific moment isn't the moment, because first you need to get some things in order. You have to get your house in order, because we're not 22 anymore in a garage with like very little to lose. In fact, we have a lot to lose at this point in our life. That said, it's actually not too late. And if anything, I think we have more advantages at this age than I did if I had started at 22, 23, whatever, in my 20s and 30s, because I have the capital where I could do some experimentation with. And if I needed to keep it totally bootstrapped, I could have. I have the connections and the network that I didn't have when I was very young. So I had friends who, could make introductions. I have a lot more experience. I understand how businesses work. So a lot of the questions to me, it was almost like I had a archetype of a business in a box. Like, okay, I know how this works. There's marketing, then there's sales, there's support, there's product delivery, there's then repeat. Like that whole business cycle, I just know it very well from working for so many years. And so I think now, if you really, really want to do this, you're actually maybe better positioned than you've ever been before in life to do it. And I think this is now is the time for us. This is a brilliant, beautiful time in our lives after 40. I think we're really at the top of our game.
Yes, yes. No, thank you. I that was super inspiring. I could tell you had a lot of passion behind that with the gesticulations, and I agree. I think there's so many reasons why people who are 40 and older are more prepared in a variety of ways than they were in 20s. And I could certainly come up with a litany of things that, yeah, maybe I had more energy, but, I'm doing things differently or I'm more efficient than I was banging 20 hours a day. Now I can maybe get that done in a subset of that. So that's fantastic. And Andrew, since we're a community in this together at UnLost Cause, what ask would you like to request from the community of listeners in the audience?
I would love it if people would share the word about the good life abroad. It's a concept that people just don't know about, this idea of living abroad for a few months. And I would also encourage everyone to think about their own retirement and what that looks like in life, and then start to make a plan to how are you going to build that dream life upon retirement. Start laying down some track for that now. And in my case, this dream of wanting to live, part of the year in Europe led me directly into my business. But I think it's a great exercise for people to do to kind of reverse engineer their futures. And not a better time to start than now.
Yes. And if the audience is inspired by your story, how can they support, contact, or follow your journey moving forward?
Great. Our website is thegoodlifeabroad.com, and our Instagram and Facebook is also thegoodlifeabroad.com. So I would encourage you to follow us on the socials. You can send me a message through our Instagram or Facebook Messenger, and eventually that message will get to me, and I do reply to any messages that are sent to me directly. So those would be the best places to find me.
Got it. So, Andrew, your story is a testament to the power of reinvention and designing life on your terms. You've shown that with intention, courage, and community, it's never too late to turn a dream into reality. So, if you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. And remember, the dream you put on hold doesn't have to remain a lost cause. You have the power to change it into an unlost cause.
Thank you, David.
Before you go, if you're inspired and want to be a part of something bigger, subscribe, like, and share to help more people reclaim their dreams and live true to themselves. Also, let me know if you or someone you know would be an inspiring guest on this show. Together, let's spark courage to live without regrets, the UnLost Cause way, one story and one person at a time.